Notice what your hand does the next time there is a gap. You are standing in an elevator and it is going up 4 floors, 20 seconds of nothing, and your hand is already reaching for your phone. You are waiting at a red light. You are in a checkout line. There is a lull in a conversation, a pause between episodes, a moment in bed before sleep, and in that small pocket of empty time. Before you have even decided anything, your hand moves. It reaches for the glowing rectangle, for something, anything to look at, to be filled. You cannot, it seems, simply be unentertained, alone with your own mind for even a handful of seconds. You probably think this is a modern problem, a symptom of phones and apps and short attention spans. It is not, because a French mathematician named Blaise Pascal watched human beings do the exact same thing, minus the phone more than 350 years ago, and he wrote down a diagnosis so sharp it should stop you cold. He said that almost the entire unhappiness of human beings comes down to a single cause. And the cause is this, that we are not able to sit quietly alone in a room. That sounds far too simple to be true. A whole life's worth of misery from one small inability. But Pascal was not a simple thinker, and what he saw underneath that little failure is one of the most unnerving and most useful ideas anyone has ever had about why we live the way we do. So let's do the thing the idea is about. Let's sit still with it. Here is what he actually wrote, and I want to give it to you in his own words, because the plainness of it is the power of it. I have often said, Pascal wrote, that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room. And then, in another fragment of the same unfinished book, he goes further. The only thing, he said, that consoles us for our miseries is diversion. And yet, it is the greatest of our miseries. Sit with that second part, because it is the twist that makes the whole thing profound. He is not just saying we are bad at being still. He is saying that the thing we use to escape our unhappiness, distraction, entertainment, busyness, is itself the deepest source of our unhappiness. The cure is the disease. He had a word for it, a word that is the key to everything he is saying. Divertissement, diversion. And by diversion, he did not mean only amusement in the shallow sense. He meant something vast. He meant almost everything we do. Because here was Pascal's astonishing claim. He looked at all of human activity, the striving, the ambition, the working, the socializing, the wars, the games, the endless pursuit of things, and he argued that most of it is not what it appears to be. We tell ourselves we want the promotion, the money, the victory, the relationship, the goal. But underneath, Pascal said we do not really want these things for themselves. We want them because chasing them keeps us busy, and being busy keeps us from the one thing we cannot bear. Being alone with ourselves, in the quiet with nothing to distract us, forced to actually look at our own condition. And what is it exactly that we are so desperate not to look at? Pascal was unflinching here, and this is where it gets dark before it gets light. He said that if you strip away all the diversion, if you take a person and put them in a room with nothing to do and no way to distract themselves and just leave them there, something rises up that they will do almost anything to avoid. They begin to feel the actual truth of the human situation, that we are small and fragile, and that we are going to die, that we did not choose to be here and do not fully know why we are here, that beneath all our activity, there is a kind of emptiness, a void, a silence that our achievements never quite fill. The noise of our lives, Pascal said, is a wall we build against that silence. Because in the silence, we are afraid we will hear the one thing we spend everything to avoid hearing. The sound of our own mortality and our own smallness and our own uncertainty about what any of it is for. And to show you how strange and specific this is, Pascal gives an example so precise it has never been improved upon. Consider, he said, a man who loves to hunt. He will rise before dawn, ride out into the cold, exhaust himself for an entire day, all to chase down a single hare. Now, Pascal says, offer that man the hare. Just give it to him for free at the start of the day. Here is your hare. No need to hunt. He will refuse it. He does not want it. Because, and this is the whole thing, he never actually wanted the hare. If he wanted the hare, he could buy one at the market. What he wanted was the hunt, the chase, the pursuit that occupied his mind and his body so completely that for one whole day he did not have to think about death, or his life, or himself. The hare was never the point. The hare was just the excuse for the chase, and the chase was a way of not thinking. And Pascal's devastating observation is that they do not know this. They genuinely believe they are chasing the quarry. They cannot see that they are really just fleeing themselves. Now sit with how much of your own life that explains. This is why arriving at the goal is so strangely disappointing. You chase the promotion for years, and you get it, and there is a brief flash of satisfaction, and then, faster than you expected, a flatness, an emptiness, and the immediate need for a new goal to chase. You told yourself you wanted the achievement. But the moment you have it, the hunt is over, and there is nothing left between you and your own thoughts again, so you urgently need a new hare to chase. This is the treadmill nearly every human being is on. Not because we are greedy exactly, but because the chasing itself was always the point. The having was never going to satisfy, because satisfaction would mean stillness, and stillness is the very thing we are running from. And Pascal drives it home with the sharpest example of all. You would think, he says, that a king would be perfectly happy. A king has everything, wants for nothing, every pleasure available at a word. So a king, of all people, should be able to simply sit and enjoy his good fortune. But Pascal says the opposite is true. A king is the person most in need of diversion of all. Because take away a king's entertainments, his hunts, his wars, his courtiers, his spectacles. Leave a king truly alone with nothing to distract him. And what is left? Just a man thinking about his own death exactly like everyone else. And so Pascal observed, kings are surrounded deliberately by people whose entire job is to make sure the king is never alone with his own mind. An army of entertainers and advisors and companions, all quietly ensuring that the most powerful man in the kingdom never has to sit quietly in a room and think about himself, because everyone knows that if he did, king though he is, he would be miserable. Having everything does not cure the problem. It just buys a more elaborate distraction from it. And a century and a half later, another philosopher gave a name to the exact thing that rushes in the moment the diversion stops. Arthur Schopenhauer said that human life swings like a pendulum, back and forth between two miseries. On one side, pain, which is what we feel when we want something we do not have. And on the other side, the moment we finally get it, boredom, which is what floods in when there is nothing left to want. We suffer while we are chasing, and then the instant we catch the thing, we are bored, so we launch after the next thing to escape the boredom, and the whole pendulum swings again. And Schopenhauer drew a conclusion from this even darker than Pascal's. The very existence of boredom, he argued, is proof that life has no built-in meaning of its own. Because if simply being alive were inherently satisfying, we could just sit and exist and be content. The fact that mere existence with nothing added bores us to the point of agony. The fact that we must constantly fill it with activity to make it bearable is evidence that there is an emptiness at the center that we are forever papering over. Boredom, he said, is nothing less than the feeling of the emptiness of life itself. And that is the feeling waiting in Pascal's quiet room. not nothing. The bare experience of existence with the distractions stripped away, which we find so unbearable that we will do nearly anything to avoid it. Now Pascal wrote all of this by candlelight in a world of horses and letters, where the fastest distraction available was a hunt or a card game. So I want you to consider for a moment what he would make of what we have built. Because we did not just fail to solve the problem, Pascal identified. We industrialized it. We have put into every pocket on earth a small glass device engineered by some of the most brilliant people alive, working for companies worth trillions of dollars, whose entire business model depends on one thing: ensuring that you never, not for 1 second, have to be alone with your own mind. Every buzz, every feed, every autoplay, every infinite scroll is a perfectly optimized hare. Release the instant you might otherwise have to sit in the silence. Pascal thought the human flight from stillness was a profound spiritual problem. We took that flight and turned it into the most profitable industry in human history. We built a machine for diversion so powerful that Pascal could not have dreamed of it, and we carry it with us everywhere. And we reach for it, as you now know, before we have even decided to. And if you doubt how deep this runs, how real the terror of the empty room actually is, consider what happened when psychologists at the University of Virginia decided to test it directly in 2014. They did something very simple. They put people in a plain room, alone, and asked them to do nothing but sit and think for up to 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no distraction. Just them and their own mind. And they gave the participants one option. In the room was a small device that would deliver a real, painful electric shock. These were people who had beforehand said they would pay money to avoid being shocked. And yet, left alone with their own thoughts for 15 minutes, many of them started shocking themselves. 67% of the men and a quarter of the women chose to give themselves electric shocks rather than simply sit quietly with their own minds. One man shocked himself 190 times. Read that again. People chose physical pain over the experience of being alone with themselves. Pascal confirmed in a laboratory 3.5 centuries later. We would quite literally rather feel pain than feel nothing. And here is the part of Pascal's thought that should genuinely frighten you. The reason this is not just an interesting quirk but a real tragedy. Because diversion does not only distract us from a single dull afternoon, it runs out the entire clock. Pascal said that diversion is the thing which, above all, prevents us from thinking about ourselves and quietly leads us imperceptibly to death. Do you see what he means? We spend our whole lives fleeing from one hare to the next, from distraction to distraction, from the phone to the work, to the show to the phone again. And we never stop, and we never look, and we never actually ask what our life is or what it is for or whether we are even present in it. And then it ends. We divert ourselves cheerfully and continuously all the way to the grave, having successfully avoided for an entire lifetime the single hour of stillness in which we might have actually met ourselves. The diversion saves us from a few uncomfortable minutes and charges us the whole examined life in return. We are so afraid of the silence of one still evening that we sacrifice the depth of our entire existence to avoid it. So that is the diagnosis, and it is bleak, and Pascal meant it to be. But I do not think the story ends in the dark, and here is why. Because everything we are fleeing when we flee, that silence, it turns out, is standing guard in front of everything we actually want. Think about what is only available in the quiet room. Self-knowledge is there, the ability to actually understand what you feel and why, which you can never reach while drowning it in noise. Real thought is there. Every genuine idea, every piece of art, every solution anyone has ever had came from a mind that was willing to stay with something in stillness instead of fleeing it. Creativity is not something that happens to you in the scroll. It happens in the empty room. Presence is there, the ability to actually be inside your own life as it happens instead of watching it go by from behind a screen perpetually elsewhere. And strangest of all, peace is there. Not the absence of the void Pascal described, but a completely different relationship to it. Because it turns out that the emptiness we are so terrified to face, when we finally stop running and actually sit down in front of it, is not the monster we feared. Much of its power came precisely from our refusal to look at it. The people who can sit alone in a room quietly without reaching for anything are not enduring some grim punishment. They have access to a kind of home that the rest of us are locked out of. They are, in the deepest sense, the only people who are ever truly at ease anywhere, because they are at ease with the one person they can never get away from. You do not have to become a monk. I am not asking you to renounce your phone or your ambitions or the pleasures of a good distraction. I am asking something much smaller and much harder. Sometime soon try to do the single most radical thing available to a modern human being. Sit in a room. Leave the phone in a different room out of reach and simply be there doing nothing for a while. And when you feel the pull, that almost physical craving to reach for something, to fill the space, to flee, notice it and do not obey it. Let the discomfort come, let the boredom come, and maybe underneath it, that little edge of dread Pascal was talking about. And just stay. Stay in the room, because here is what 3.5 centuries have confirmed. The room was never the problem. The running was always the problem. Pascal found the whole vast unhappiness of humankind hiding inside our inability to stay in one quiet room with ourselves, which means that a strange, enormous, and completely free kind of peace is waiting on the other side of learning to stay. You have been running from that room your entire life, certain that something unbearable was inside it. But the only thing that was ever in there waiting, in the silence you worked so hard to avoid, was you. And it turns out that meeting yourself finally without flinching is not the thing to be afraid of. It is the thing you were actually looking for in every single hare you ever chased. So sit down, stay, and let the person you've been running from your whole life finally catch up. If this is the kind of thing you want to keep thinking about, I have written 2 books that go deeper. The shadow you carry, about the parts of yourself waiting in that quiet room, the ones you have spent years refusing to look at, and on wanting, about the chase itself, why we pursue what we pursue, and what we are really running from when we run. The links are in the description. Whenever you are ready,